Hi there. One of the ways that we know what is stopping us is by looking back at the stories we told ourselves as kids. Because you probably know this already, we're conditioned in the first 7 years of our life, and that basically sets us up. Now, it doesn't mean that's set in stone, it means that we are going to play certain roles up to the point that we actually awaken and decide we want something different. And when you start looking towards your bigger dreams, this stuff is going to come up. It always is. And I don't care whether you're just starting out, you're just launching a business, or you're already at seven figures, where you are, these are the stories that are going to come back and ask to be rewired, to be repatterned, to be looked at differently so that you can get to the truth instead of believing something that you were either told or experienced or simply just feared. And today I'm going to give you a little story about one of my experiences and how I've had to overcome that over and over again. And before I get into that story, I just want to say I've been kind of absent from YouTube for at least, I don't know, a couple of weeks, few weeks, I don't even remember. And it's not that didn't want to be here. It's really that sometimes, we do have to take these breaks, and I'm just at that place in my own evolution right now where I had both a lot of just practical things I needed to take care of, and that required a lot of my attention and energy. So I just didn't want to do a half-ass video. I want to be fully present. And then the other piece is I was really looking at where do I want to take this channel, what messages do I want to convey, who am I speaking to, and it's sometimes it feels like it's easy and it's very clear, and other times it's with the experience I've had, I can actually speak to lots of different challenges and different groups of people. So sometimes I need to take time out to kind of go, wait a second, let's look at, the thing that I often talk about is look at my bigger vision, and is this channel supporting it? And it's not that I'm off track or anything, but to really make these videos more worthwhile. And I would like to do some longer videos as well that get into a little more substance so that you can get the most out of them, and perhaps understand, whether it's through my background and experience or the experiences I talk about with my clients, that you can begin to really connect on how can that benefit me, and what can I start doing differently that I haven't been doing or I haven't been noticing is as important as it actually needs to be. So that was, those are the two reasons. And so now let's get to the story I wanted to share. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint you a little picture of a moment I remember to this day from childhood, and the themes that came up, and how they've shown up again. And I think you'll be able to relate, even if you don't have those particular beliefs or you didn't have an experience like that, you're going to have had your own, right? So, and then often these themes that come up through stories like that are archetypal. It's not like, oh, that was just personal to me. I can guarantee that there are billions of people who have had similar experiences or thoughts. And so when we hear that from another person, what happens is that we feel validated. Oh yes, this is not weird or abnormal, or there was nothing wrong with me. It's just kind of as I said, things that we're conditioned with, we're programmed with, or and watching the way humans act, that we take on, and then we can end up fearing sometimes, instead of kind of, as I said, going for more of the truth. So here I was, it was elementary school, right? So, young girl, and I'm sitting in assembly, and it's the end of the school year, and there are awards being presented on the stage for, best this, best that, and so on and so forth. And they get to the moment where they're going to call the name of the student who had the highest grades. And I don't know how long this lasted, but it's amazing sometimes how something as short as like 30 seconds can have like a flood of thoughts that come forward, a flood of emotions that come forward. And it feels like forever because that, as I said, that memory is etched in my brain. And yet, it might have been just a really short span of time. So they're about to call the name. And, to this point, I guess I'd never really thought about it. Like, I was in elementary school. I did well. I liked doing well, but I didn't know who was better than me, who was so-called worse than me in grades. I just didn't know where I ranked. I knew that I did fairly well, as I said. And so in that moment, suddenly I thought, what happens if they call my name? Like I could actually feel, I viscerally felt it, like it could be that it was possible. Now, as I said, I wasn't really trying to be the smartest student or anything, so it's not like I had a strong, like, yes, this is going to be me, or to expect it. It was more that I realized that it was actually possible because I was close enough in that range that if I wanted to, I probably could. But guess what? The thoughts that came out were like, oh my gosh, that would be fantastic, or that'd be so exciting, or wouldn't it be wonderful if? No, I had two very distinct thoughts that came up. The first was, uh-oh, if they call my name, the other kids who actually want this award, they're going to be jealous. And then they're going to look at me like I'm a threat to them. And then suddenly I'm going to have to like be aware of the way people are looking at me, and I don't want to be under that spotlight where other people are going to possibly feel threatened, and it's going to change my how I get to play and act with my fellow students and all of this. So that thought, that fear came up, that suddenly I'd have to like manage how people were reacting around me. That was the fear. And then the other one was that if I get it, now suddenly, again, people are going to be looking at me and they're going to expect me to do better and better. And I don't want that kind of pressure, you know? And I mean, I'm laughing because it's so funny to think of a kid worried about this. It's not like I was a multimillionaire with tons of responsibilities, but it was very clear to me, those two concerns. And I was from a young age an observer of humans. I've always I was very adept at noticing how people acted and the patterns and their reactions. And so this information kind of came down right away. And so my initial fear was, uh-oh, like while that might be great, these are going to be the consequences that I'm going to have to deal with. So the name was then called. It wasn't me. It was another girl in the class. So I mostly felt relieved. I mean, I think I had a little moment of, wow, like I could have been close had I even known about this thing. Maybe I could have got it. But most of me was kind of relieved because it meant that I could stay in my happy place of, where I wanted to be in the class. I could do well, but I wasn't under a spotlight where suddenly people are going to be expecting more of me or thinking in certain ways about me. And I just didn't want that pressure. And, there's a pro to that as well as a con to that, right? Because we do these things out of safety, usually, some kind of safety that we want. In my case, the safety was more, it felt like a conscious decision to protect my inner world. I was very conscious of that, and that was really important to me, even at a young age. And so I think in some way that's what I was trying to do, because I knew that if I was kind of a little more in the spotlight, suddenly people would know more about me, and then I could have comments come towards me and things that maybe weren't what would be supportive, okay? But there's a negative side. Of course there is. The negative side is that I was obviously holding myself back in some way. And had I not done that, maybe I would have pushed harder, as in not to effort, but really, it's like, when you're so close to a goal, you want to push that little bit to get to the goal because you're right there. Why would you walk in the opposite direction, right? So I could have gotten it, and maybe my talents and abilities would have been recognized at an earlier age. That would have opened up new paths sooner rather than later, right? So, I look at that, and, I went on, and, the rest of school, elementary school was fine, and high school was okay, but high school was okay. It was never particularly exciting because I wasn't being challenged in the ways I wanted. And I think I was, again, kind of holding back from, I don't want to be in this group necessarily, and where there's a lot of pressure and I have to be, again, with certain people and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it was probably university when I began to, or after high school, I should say, when I began to shake out of that. And yes, this is a long time ago, but my point that you'll get as I go through this video is that this kind of story, you're right, when it's something that we remember so starkly, it's going to be a story that probably is going to repeat itself. As I said, even if you start, really succeeding in your business, even if you're famous, these kind of stories, they keep showing up because they're asking us to grow past them, to really go to the truth, and also to grow and overcome them because they may be true. And I have found that those fears that I had were true, but I can also react differently. I can respond in a different way that's going to allow me to have what it is that I desire without falling falling prey to the fears instead, right? So yeah, so once I, was somewhere like past high school, I started, I basically took some risks. I traveled overseas. I, went and studied overseas as well. And I started a business, and I started doing all these things that were kind of beyond the little station that most people thought I was in, right? And, when you're kind of I'll just, I was a social person, still am to some extent, and very friendly and enjoy talking to lots of people. So sometimes when you're like that, people just think, oh, you're such a nice person. You're such a sweet person. But they don't think you, they don't even know that you have depth, right? So when I started doing all this different stuff, it's like people would look at me, like people who knew me, but they didn't, I wasn't getting a lot of congratulations. It's not like people were supporting me in some obvious way. It was more like they were kind of going, oh, what is she doing? Who does she, what is happening? She's suddenly doing these things that nobody in that sphere was doing. And, I didn't need people's approval. I just didn't. So I still did these things. And I was like, my soul was calling me so strongly that I just had the confidence, honestly, at that time to take these leaps and do all these great things that I wanted. And I was ambitious, right? It kind of felt like now that I'm out of school, I can actually have the freedom to be more of who I am. And so that was really energizing to me. Now later in my business, so we're going to fast forward many years now, I was ready to kind of go up to my next level. And guess what? Those fears that I had started coming out. People started expressing them and projecting some of that onto me. And it was very uncomfortable. And even though, in the moment, again, I was like, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. But, you start hearing these, voices in the background. And obviously, this piece from that childhood, even though I had gone so much far past that, it was now, because I was going to a new level, it was kind of coming back to be addressed, to be overcome. And so, for example, in the sphere of transformational coaching, if you're out there, you're following the big coaches, and they're talking about 6 figures and beyond 6 figures and millions of dollars and all this, right? I mean, that's part of business, right? If you're not going to talk about money, then you probably don't belong in business. Yes, even if you do something you deeply love and you're doing it because it's a passion and a mission, you're going to look at the bottom line. So money does matter, right? In that sphere, of course it does. And so, my friends were finding out that I was doing certain programs and listening to certain webinars and reading certain books. And I started getting comments. Oh, don't you know that they say that you only need about $75,000 per year to be happy? And then after that, people usually aren't any happier than they would be at 75,000. And of course, I'm talking about North America now. And I just thought that was the strangest comment to make to me suddenly. And then the irony was, this was coming from girlfriends who I would call ambitious. They had studied things that would land them, high level careers. One of them had talked about for years about wanting to be a philanthropist. Well, how do you be a philanthropist if you don't have any money? But now, suddenly, the very thought that I might be studying a webinar that was led by somebody who's a millionaire, that somehow I should only make $75,000 a year. Like, it was just weird. And I wasn't saying anything. I wasn't talking about my goals. I hadn't stated a number to them about what I wanted to reach. And it was not as if I thought that was going to lead me to happiness, because I know that my happiness is not about that. I do know that my happiness is following my bigger visions. And when I don't do it, I'm not as passionate in life. I'm just not alive. I just get bored. And it's not even about succeeding. It's not about what other people think about me. It's by exercising my capacity and my ability to be who I am and experiment and take risks, right? To me, that's fun. So it was so strange that I was starting to get these comments. And then there'd be the old friend who's like visiting, who had, moved away and was visiting, and be like, oh, yeah, you really need, like, people these days, they don't make money just having a business. You'll have to have a part-time job or something that can support you and all of that. And I heard this many times. And at one point, I actually tried that because my business was kind of going quiet, and I realized I wanted to change direction. So I took this part-time job that was very aligned to what I do in my business. But I thought, okay, it'll give me some stability while I have the rest of my day to create. Now, sometimes that works for people. And if it does for you, awesome. Right? If you need to kind of do different things at the same time, maybe you have responsibilities that require that. It didn't work for me. It just made me like exhausted, right? Because suddenly I felt like too much pressure, and then the mentality that I had to sustain within the employee mindset was like completely against the mindset of a business owner. And so for me, it was not very helpful. And so, again, these were things that I was kind of people kept like making these kind of recommendations. And these are people, by the way, who weren't running their own business. They weren't at a level that I was like, oh, I'm aspiring to be you. But yet somehow they were telling me what I'm supposed to do. So this is very common when you suddenly start shifting, when you start transforming into a person other than what people around you are comfortable with. And of course, I wish that I had people around me who got it, who were more entrepreneurial, or at least like that they supported my vision, right? Because I was happily supporting theirs. But you can't always count on that. So I did get comments, and people were clearly jealous, right? I remember one example where I made a decision to be in this program, and this was like outside of my business at the time, although I was thinking of adding it as a service, and that was the styling and the fashion. And then I went and took a program in Paris, France, and I shared that with a friend. And of course, like I was happy, I was excited. It was also scary in some ways to do something that was quite different than the business that I had. And the response was, oh, well, I'm going on a trip as well, right? Like, no moment to say, wow, this sounds cool, tell me more about it. No, I'm going on this trip. As like it's obviously brought up something in her at the time. And she had like lots of great things in her life. So I was really stunned at that reaction. And, it's okay in a sense that people, we all have different feelings and people can get jealous. That's okay. Now, ideal, of course, if they're your true friend, they're going to get over that and say, oh, shoot, I just noticed I did that. I'm so sorry. I want to be here for you in your celebration. And yes, it brought up something in me. And I think I'm going to look at that, right? Like that would have been an ideal situation. But in this case, it just felt like, again, like I was breaking patterns. I was going outside the boundaries of where people like wanted to place me, right? Because they knew me in a certain way. And every time I've done that, whether it's to grow my business, expand in a certain way, do something completely different, like that fashion program looked on the surface to everyone as if it was something completely different, right? Not something that I would do, that they had these reactions, right? But truthfully, it was a subject that like I've been, I really love textiles and color and design and all of that. So I had been like, privately enjoying this for many years before I decided to actually expand into offering some of that in my styling work. And, but this is where, like if you're a multifaceted person, if you're a creative person, the more entrepreneurial you're probably going to have multiple interests and multiple things that you're just naturally studying. And you're probably not going to be talking about them to everybody around you, right? And so once you start showing up in these ways that might have been private at some point, but now are, people are seeing that you're actually doing something seriously, it can threaten people. Right? So that little fear that I had as a young girl in school was showing up in my life. And then other things I was doing, like with my transformational coaching work, I remember having different, obviously you got to show up. I had different photos I was using in some of my posts, social media, and again I was getting comments like, oh, no one's going to kind of take you seriously with that look or something, or like just weird things that people seem to say, like, oh, you're supposed to look like that. And I can be soft-spoken at times, and I think I've mentioned this in a previous video, and suddenly it was like, no, you have to be loud and kind of aggressive, and you have to be this way and that way in order to be noticed. And again, it was just like getting unsolicited comments from people because they have a story in their head that this is who you're supposed to be, and people who aren't like that cannot succeed. And that's why they keep themselves limited in lives and businesses that are not their true self. And again, fortunately, I can say that I've never let that stop me. Has it made me pause? Has it slowed me down? Unfortunately, yeah. Not because I consciously took it in, but because it was, I think, triggering this old fear and this belief that I held when I was young. And that it mattered. Because quite frankly, now where I am, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care if somebody has a very different opinion about what I should be doing. That's their business, right? It's not mine. And if they don't know me, if they're not with me on a very regular basis, they clearly do not know me, right? Enough. They're not in my inner circle. So I'm sharing this because I want you to also look at, are there little stories that you remember, and have they replayed? Because they're going to come up in those places to, some people say test you, and yes and no. It's a test in that, like, have I overcome this? Have I expanded over this? But it's not as a test as in a mean way to do anything to you. It's because in order to be at this next level, you're going to have to deal with it, right? We all know, like, famous people out there and people who are highly successful financially or whatever, they are known. And their lives are not simple in that regard. They sometimes cannot go out without being noticed, right? So they lose certain freedoms. They have comments all the time. They've got trolls around them all the time on social media and whatnot. So this is going to happen. Now, when you are a so-called, not a famous person, you like me, you just feel like a regular person who's going about living your dreams and doing your best to actually live them and create them. It's very unsettling when your own family or friends start doing this, right? People who are close to you, who, you'd think would be happy for you. But it doesn't always happen. And if you feel that, I want to give you some encouragement to trust yourself anyway, and to start to be more discerning of who you're listening to. And if you are at the place where you're finding you're getting stuck, you're like, yeah, I do have a certain amount of success. I've got a great life, but I don't know, this next level isn't just, something's not happening. It may be because there is an old belief or thought that you need to overcome again, right? Because the one thing I've noticed every time I go past these boundaries that other people think I should be within, it's like I have to deal with it all over again. And it's like they're saying, just be happy being normal. Just be happy being normal. Just be content. Stop shaking things up all the time. Stop being different. And I don't know why people have to do that. But it's funny, people do get threatened sometimes. And anybody that I think most of us admire has had to go through that and come through it in order to hold this new self, right? You're expanding the space in which you can show up. You're releasing those boundaries because there really aren't as many boundaries as we think there are. You're expanding into a bigger life, and that's going to take a self that just lets those comments and thoughts dissolve, because you don't need them. You don't need them. The further you want to go, it's better to have less baggage. And less baggage simply means you're letting it go. You're not holding on to it. You're not having to think about everything that's trying to stop you. You're actually moving forward anyway. And so the other thing I guess I want to say, and I know this, but I know in the moment it didn't feel this way. So in the moment I often felt like, well, why am I not having more support? Like, why isn't it being reflected back to me? All of the wonderful risks I think I'm taking and all of that. Why don't I have the kind of positive support and empowerment around me? And sometimes it's just because we have to do certain things alone. And it's by doing them alone that we get to kind of feel what's in here, right? Who we really are. And having gone through the things that I've gone through, I do not think mental or emotional support from other people is always necessary, actually, because it's us who has to support ourselves. It's not like everyone can be around you, like cheerleading you, but honestly, unless you're feeling it for you, all of that is worthless. It's nice. Sometimes it's nice, but it's not required. And the sooner you start believing in yourself and letting those thoughts and comments dissolve, the easier it's going to be for you to make that next leap, to go past the boundaries that for whatever reason were set up. And I will share with you also, as a young child, like some that I did have these bigger ideas and desires and fantasies, as I would call them as a kid, like, oh gosh, I would love to be that person or do that. And these were big things, right? Because, we see things on TV, we read about them, and we're like, wow, right? That's what we end up kind of imagining. And so I had some of that too. And so today, I'm reclaiming some of that. I'm reclaiming that. And I now, because of who, I'm older, I'm wiser, I know certain things, I've gone through certain things, I know what matters, what doesn't matter more. I can now take those dreams and go, yes, I think I will go that way because I desire it. I would choose it because it was also a natural part of me. It was also planted in me at a young age, and I can follow that. And we all have different beliefs about life, but if you're watching my channel, mine is very much about keep growing, keep expanding, keep exploring. This is about expressing who we really are, not about hiding ourselves behind what other people feel like safe in, like, oh my gosh, they're gonna feel intimidated if I end up experiencing this or winning this or making this amount of money or being this kind of person online. We have to let that go, because does it really matter? I can't imagine a life where listening to that would actually amount to anything that we would remember. So I hope this story of mine has had you kind of maybe pick up a couple of points about what may be something that it's time for you to overcome, and to ask, does this actually matter? Right? It doesn't matter now to me in the way it did what other people think. It doesn't matter if temporarily somebody may actually feel jealous. So what? Right? That's okay. They're allowed their feelings. Again, as I said, if they're mature, they'll waken up at that and actually use your experience as an inspiration. And that's the other thing, by the way, that has happened, whether or not people have said this to me. So many times, just by hearing something that I was saying or watching me pursue something, I've had people like suddenly do a big shift and then take another route in their life because they were like, oh, she can do it, so can I. And those are the people that I love to talk to, because when that happens, I mean, we're supporting each other. We're like role models just by, yeah, you know what? She or he is like brave enough to do this. Let me try it as well. So if you are at a place where you would like some one-on-one guidance, then just click on the link in the description box. And one of the ways that I work with people is by having these conversations so that we can dig up those silly things that we allowed to get in the way. And sometimes, yeah, they're more serious, but by actually looking them and facing them, we can get beyond them. And guess what? Like, the next step is just so much easier. And I can tell you that today, with technology being what it is, with our access to things, internationally, it is so much easier than it used to be to make our dreams come true. I mean, I've had clients, I have clients in other countries. It's not like I'm reliant on whoever I can meet locally anymore, right? That's so easy. And there's people all around the world that resonate with the way I show up, with the way I speak, and what I can do and what I can offer. And that's true for you as well. So follow your dreams. Really, really allow yourself to go into what is real for me, what is true for me that maybe other people around me won't accept or won't agree with, because usually it's only initial, right? It's their fears that are coming up typically. And sometimes, it can be in love. It's like, I love you, I don't want you to suffer. But, that's a bit misguided, But I have found over time, most people get over it. And in the end, they start going, oh, wow, that was really inspiring, or I admire that, or wow, now you are really a role model. And it's not about going, that's not why I think any of us do these things, but I'm just saying that can show up too, even if it didn't show up when you thought you needed it. So what is your next biggest step? And what are you going to do to make it come true? I'd love to hear. Write some notes in the comments if you want to share what you got out of this video, or maybe an experience you've had that you've been able to overcome, and any questions you may have.